Hi, and thank you for visiting my channel. For more information, kindly subscribe and follow. Now let's get started. Ever since Solo Sikoa lost the Ulafala to Roman Reigns at Raw's debut show on Netflix, Jacob Fatu and Tama Tonga have been wreaking havoc on SmackDown and confronting multiple stars. Sikoa made his first TV appearance since losing the Tribal Combat match tonight, following an attack by Fatu and Tonga on Jimmy Uso and Carmelo Hayes, who were competing in a singles bout. However, due to fans booing him, he left the arena without saying a word. Following Solo leaving the arena due to fans being disrespectful, Jacob Fatu lashed out at the fans and warned the entire SmackDown roster that he was just getting started. LA Knight then rushed out from behind and launched an attack on Fatu and Tonga. However, he was soon outnumbered by the members of the new bloodline. In a shocking moment, Braun Strowman came out for the save and had a monstrous face-off with Jacob Fatu after taking out Tama Tonga and was ready for a war. However, before things could escalate further, Tonga pulled the Samoan werewolf out of the ring, and they walked out of the ring. A fan video that's now going viral on social media showed Jacob breaking character as he left the ring. As Jacob Fatu was exiting on the ramp, he took off the tank top that he was wearing and gave it to a fan, breaking his heel character and being nice to the fan after Solo Sikoa left the show abruptly without uttering a word. Jacob Fatu to wrestle in a high-stakes match at major event. Last month, fans witnessed the history-making Saturday night's main event show, which gained praise from reviewers, critics, and spectators alike. SNME is all set to return on January 25, 2025 on NBC. The latest episode of Friday Night SmackDown saw the addition of a big high-stakes singles match featuring Jacob Fatu and Braun Strowman. Following their intense face-off on the Blue brand, the Stamford-based promotion officially announced this bout for Saturday night's main event next week. Jacob vs. Braun is the third official match on the card after Gunther vs. Jey Uso and Braun Breaker vs. Sheamus were previously announced. With the newest addition, the SNME already looks better and stacked and promises another memorable night. It remains to be seen what plans Triple H-led creatives have in store for Fatu in the coming months on SmackDown. It was a night that no one would soon forget on WWE SmackDown, as the arena buzzed with anticipation for what promised to be a historic segment in the saga of the Bloodline. Roman Reigns, still on his undisputed throne, had been absent for weeks, leaving his empire in the hands of his loyal enforcer, Solo Sikoa. But for the first time in months, something began to crack within the walls of the faction. The tension between Solo and his cousin, Jacob Fatu, had reached its boiling point. No one could have predicted what would happen next. Jacob Fatu, the towering Samoan powerhouse, had long been rumored to be joining the Bloodline as a new force, bringing a new level of dominance and intimidation to the group. His presence on SmackDown was seen as a coup, a statement to the rest of the roster that the Bloodline was stronger than ever. But even the most loyal members of a dynasty can falter, and tonight was a clear sign that loyalty within the Bloodline was nothing more than a fragile illusion. As the show progressed, the cameras caught an unplanned moment that would leave the WWE Universe in shock. The new Bloodline, as fans had taken to calling them, had been moving with a level of confidence rarely seen in the wrestling world. Jacob Fatu, clad in his intimidating ring gear, stood alongside Solo Sikoa and the recently returned Jimmy Uso, ready to make an announcement that would shake the SmackDown roster to its core. The idea was simple. The Bloodline would remain unshakable, united under the leadership of Roman Reigns, but now bolstered by the raw power of Jacob Fatu. But when Solo Sikoa, visibly frustrated and holding a microphone, turned on his so-called brother in front of the live crowd, the tension hit a breaking point. The moment Solo walked away from the group, rejecting Jacob's efforts to solidify the new Bloodline, everything changed. What was supposed to be a smooth, orchestrated moment suddenly became an all-too-human mess of emotions, and Jacob Fatu was caught in the middle of it. Fatu's expression faltered for just a split second. The menacing facade that had made him one of the most feared figures in WWE began to crack, as his lips twitched in something between anger and disbelief. For a moment, His anger was no longer directed at the fans or the challengers in the ring. It was directed inwardly, toward the betrayal from within his own bloodline. The unthinkable had just happened. Solo Sikoa had walked away, not just from the group, but from Jacob Fatu himself. But the real shock came when Jacob, trying to salvage the situation, was caught breaking character. As the camera zoomed in, his face shifted from controlled rage to a moment of raw vulnerability. For a split second, Fatu's professional mask slipped as he muttered something under his breath, something inaudible to the live crowd but caught perfectly on the mics. "I trusted you, Solo." In that moment, it was clear. Jacob Fatu was no longer the unshakable force that fans had come to admire. He was a man caught off guard, forced to process a betrayal that he wasn't prepared for. The calculated persona of the new bloodline had been shattered. Fans in the arena and those watching at home began to realize that the cracks in the faction were real. The bloodline was on the verge of imploding, and the audience had just witnessed it in its rawest form. But it didn't end there. The cameras lingered on Fatu's face as he fought to regain his composure. His breathing quickened as the situation grew more volatile. There were rumors circulating that Jacob Fatu was dealing with personal issues within the bloodline, and this moment only fueled those speculations. He had been brought in as the enforcer, a perfect fit for Roman Reigns' vision of dominance. But now, with Solo's exit, it seemed as though Fatu was in danger of losing everything. Solo Sikoa's departure wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a crisis that threatened the very foundation of the faction. With Roman Reigns' return seemingly in limbo, and with Fatu now showing signs of faltering, the question on everyone's mind was whether the bloodline would survive. Could Jacob Fatu rise above this betrayal, or was he destined to crumble under the weight of it all? What followed was an unplanned moment of reflection that captivated the crowd. Jacob Fatu, realizing he was no longer in control of the situation, took a deep breath and slowly turned to face the camera. He stood in the center of the ring, eyes locked on the hard lens, and in a hushed tone that carried throughout the arena, he spoke directly to Solo. "You want to walk away from this? Fine. But know this: no one walks away from the bloodline." The words echoed like a promise, a threat, and an ultimatum all wrapped into one. The WWE Universe, unsure of what to expect next, began to murmur. Was Fatu's display of vulnerability a moment of weakness, or was it an opening for him to reclaim his power? At that moment, it wasn't just Jacob Fatu on display. It was the unraveling of a myth. The bloodline had always been portrayed as invincible, untouchable, a family bound by blood and shared ambition. But now, for the first time, the cracks were visible. The illusion of unity had been shattered, and the question loomed: could the bloodline truly survive without Roman Reigns to hold it together? Fatu's post-segment interviews only deepened the mystery. When asked about the incident, he was notably more restrained than usual. His answers were laced with a quiet intensity, as if he was still processing the betrayal. For a man who had been built as a dominant force, Jacob Fatu's vulnerability was something the WWE Universe had never seen before. "I'm not going to sit here and pretend everything's fine," Fatu admitted, his eyes dark with emotion. "But one thing I know is that family comes first. Solo's not the first to doubt me, and he won't be the last. But I'll be damned if I let this bloodline fall apart." The tension in the air was palpable. SmackDown had witnessed a shift, an unraveling that could lead to something entirely new or could tear the bloodline apart for good. Jacob Fatu, once seen as an ally of Solo Sikoa and a new enforcer in the faction, had now become a man at war with his own family. And Solo, by walking away, had set the stage for a potential power struggle that would resonate for weeks to come. Was this the beginning of the end for the bloodline? Or would Jacob Fatu rise from the ashes, reclaiming his place and possibly turning against those who doubted him? One thing was certain: the legacy of the bloodline would never be the same again. And in the silence that followed the segment, as Fatu stood alone in the ring, WWE fans could only wonder what the next chapter would hold. The bloodline was fractured, and it was up to Jacob Fatu to either heal the wounds or watch it all burn to the ground.